Gustavo, first question I want to ask you is, what is one thing that most people misunderstand about Bitcoin?
Interesting. Um, mm, I guess I would say like people even now, even people that are in the industry, even people that are like on Twitter, I think often forget or misunderstand the censorship resistance value of Bitcoin. And it's extremely related to its origin story. So like for example, Silk Road or WikiLeaks receiving donations to Bitcoin as early as 2011 because they got banned from PayPal, Mastercard. To me, that's like the essential value of Bitcoin. People really focus on the scarcity and the 21 million, which is great, and it all like everything checks out in that sense. But the original value is the fact that Bitcoin is censorship resistant money. I think people often skip that part or don't understand it. And I believe that if it wasn't for the censorship resistance aspect of it, well, it wouldn't have value at all. I think that that's it. And a lot of people say that's been given up or that doesn't work anymore. There's a lot of hate nowadays. Well, there's always been, but yeah, well, and that's just untrue as well. You can see tons of people using Bitcoin for its censorship resistance. So yeah, I think that's the main thing people misunderstand about Bitcoin.
It's a good answer. I agree. And I think Bitcoin needs context in order to be understood. You can jump straight to, they say, actually, a friend of mine said this the other day, I won't steal it. To know Bitcoin is to know all things. And so for someone who's new to Bitcoin, that sounds kind of ridiculous. Like it's just a cryptocurrency or it's just a technology blockchain, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely a big discussion right now around the store of value element of Bitcoin, which at least here in the US and Western nations seems to have found sort of the narrative makes sense to people. But when you say censorship resistant money, for someone who's never been debanked, for someone who's never had any issues with just accessing their bank accounts, that may not make as much sense. So maybe describe why you think censorship resistance is so important to Bitcoin itself.
Right. Well, I mean, the scarcity is one thing. Like it's scarce, something that is good and it's scarce. It's like extremely valuable. But what's the good of it first? What is the initial value that makes the scarcity like an extra on top? Well, the censorship resistance, which just means Bitcoin is uncensorable. You cannot censor a transaction. I can send you a Bitcoin transaction today, Kyle, and nobody's going to be able to stop it. I can send a cross-border transaction. Nobody's going to be able to stop it. So it's really about that. And then there's also the confiscable resistance. The fact that Bitcoin cannot be confiscated as well. So we could also say that's part of it as well. The fact that when you have your own wallet, your own set of private keys, well, you're in control and nobody else is in control, right? So money that nobody can take away from you, transactions that nobody can censor, that don't know any border or really any sort of limit. So it's the freest form of money, and it's basically one of the freest, the tools for freedom, one of the most important tools for freedom for humanity, right? So that itself makes it so Bitcoin is usable in every context. It can be used in any country. It doesn't know any, like I said, it doesn't know any color, it doesn't know any limit. And yeah, I think that's what censorship resistance is in the end.
Why are you personally dedicating your time and energy towards the Bitcoin space versus, let's say, starting a crypto token or another project in the crypto industry?
Right. Well, I mean, I believe Bitcoin is the probably the only legitimate project in the industry. But I also believe that it's where most all of the values, 99% of the value is going to be captured, right? So I don't only believe this is a moral issue, and I think I'm on the right side of history, but I also think this is where the most value is going to be created, the most money is going to be made, right? So I think cryptocurrencies are a bit of a distraction, something that won't last necessarily that long. I mean, will there always be gambling? Will there always be cryptocurrencies? Probably. But is it going to decrease with time in interest? Yes, and I think we're already seeing it. I think we're even already seeing, as much as we already still hear mainstream people buying XRP or tokens because of TikTok trends of I don't know what's the latest, but as much as we hear that, I also believe we see more and more sophisticated investors, or at least traditional people, thinking that it's seeing the understanding the new message that it's really Bitcoin and the rest. I think that message is already resonating in the mainstream. So I don't want to waste my time, working on other stuff, and I don't want to waste my potential. Where I'm in a good position to be actually making a difference in the Bitcoin space. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of developers and software engineers find jobs in the crypto industry because there's traditional or historically been more VC funding and dollars just being sloshed around, whereas a Bitcoin company may not have that same free money luxury. I want to get into Swapido, but before that, any advice for navigating a bull market? Because a bear market, it's like if you come to Bitcoin and you make it through a bear market where the price is just coming down and down in terms of dollars or pesos or whatever, that's what really fortifies your conviction. But during a bull market, like you said, people are making a bunch of money on holding XRP or some other token. Do you have any advice for someone who's just getting into Bitcoin for how to handle the psychological element of a bull market?
That's a very good question. My first bull market was in 2017, and I guess I made a ton of mistakes. Okay, so here are the mistakes I made that people could learn from, and the lessons that I've learned from them. So the first mistake is as much as you could be making money in altcoins, because I used to be I used to buy altcoins like 7 years ago. Learn my lesson. As much as it goes up quickly, it goes down quickly. So like the money you got on paper, and even though it's worth more Bitcoins, and like maybe over a matter of weeks or months, well, that just decreases as fast. So for example, like XRP is a perfect example. I think it has never superated its all-time high, or it maybe just recently has, from back in 2017. It crashed like 95% after that. Yes, it might go up again someday, because of a meme or a narrative online, but most of it just goes away. So that's like the first message. Like gambling, just you can make money fast, but you most certainly lose money fast. Then another, and I would say trading is kind of the same thing. Even if you're trading Bitcoin with leverage, you're at risk. You're running the same risks. You can lose your money very quickly. um, I think it's very important for people to also have a remain with a cold head, and try at least to remain with a cold head. Try, maybe you can note down things, like principles you have, ideas you have about Bitcoin, that even at the top of the bull market, you can look at that piece of paper and remember, because sometimes you can become irrational. So having like a bit of a reference to when back before the bull market, so that you can like keep yourself sane or remain in the rational, in a rational zone, I think could be valuable. I remember myself becoming completely irrational at the top of some bull markets, just because money just goes to your head in some way. So I think that's important too. And honestly, and the last one I would say is, don't, like, if you made a ton of money, let's say Bitcoin goes up to 300,000, and like selling a quarter of it could like save you from like your mortgage, or like let's say you really don't want to be in a situation where we are entering a bear market again, and you got to sell Bitcoin at the low because you didn't sell at the high, because people are like, never sell your sats. Well, I mean, if you're rich, never sell, and you have a ton of income streams, never sell your sats. If you have a fiat job that you could lose during a bear market, and you had the opportunity during a bull market to cash out some money to make sure that you wouldn't put yourself at risk at the low of the bear market, well, I think that's very important too. I think that's something people should consider and should do. In my case, I did sell at some bottoms, because I was young and I didn't take precaution, and I didn't like I actually quit my fiat job back in 2017, and I've never worked a fiat job since then. I launched my first startup, but the first few years I wasn't making any money in my first startup. So I had to pay, and I was running out of fiat savings, so I took some of the Bitcoin. And today I don't regret it because I don't regret anything, but um, it's a mistake I made, and a lesson people could learn from, and a lesson I've learned too. You really want to be in a position where you have to sell your Bitcoin at the low of a bear market.
So going forward, pulling on this thread a little bit, going forward, there are so many uncertainties in Bitcoin right now with nation state adoption, institutional adoption, that using previous history of Bitcoin and the cycles may be very difficult to predict the top. So how do you kind of reconcile those two things? Like if someone's sitting there saying, hey, taking some, let's say 10% of my Bitcoin out of Bitcoin at some point during this bull market could give me some security and insurance for the future. Are there ways that you gauge no one's going to pick the top, but are there ways that you can gauge like when Bitcoin may be overheated or may be, ready for a drawdown?
Honestly, I have no idea. Everybody has their theories about that. Sometimes you would hear the classic, when the Uber drivers talking about it, but nowadays Uber drivers are talk about like trading, and Bitcoin is one of them things. So I don't know. I don't know. Honestly, I tend to believe, at least for the memes, for the laws, I tend to believe that the top of this bull market will be when like no coiners go all in. At least that's what I like to believe that's gonna happen. Let's say a no coiner, trad fi guy, so like remortgages his house to like go all in on Bitcoin at Bitcoin at 350,000. I like to believe that would be the top, but there's no signs. But it just depends on your personal situations. It doesn't make sense to be like have tons of debt, and let's say you have a low income job. Some guys are like memeing about having low income jobs, ton of fiat debt, but not selling their sats. It's like, and if you've like maybe you entered at like 60K, and now it could be 120K next month, and that 2x maybe maybe it goes to 300,000, but the fact that you just doubled your money, maybe you can pay off all your debts, and that's like life changing, or you can pay for your mom's mortgage, whatever. It depends on everyone's situation, right? But I think it doesn't really matter to catch the top. It just depends on your personal situation, right? Because yeah, having Bitcoin is nice, but like having stress on your life is just, and it's some. I think money should be used to improve your life, and like removing financial stress from your life is one of the best ways you can improve your life.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, there's a lot of Bitcoinisms that you'll hear as you start to learn about Bitcoin. Things like stack sats, stay humble. There's memes, right? Bitcoin is itself a meme in some sense. Like what I always tell people is, instead of ask, what is your opinion on something? Ask, why is this message, this meme resonating throughout the world? And I think going back to what you said at the beginning of the episode, uncensorable money, we're now living in a world where money is being censored. People are seeing it firsthand. People are being debanked. Even the president of the United States, incoming president, was debanked, right? So
Right.
nobody is immune from this. And communicating that, I want to get into Swapido because you guys are a non-custodial exchange. But before we get there, just describe to me what Swapido is and why it was created.
Right. Well, Swapido is a non-custodial platform in Mexico where you can sell Bitcoin and send pesos to any bank account in Mexico. Okay, so you create an account, you go through KYC, unfortunately, and then you enter a Mexican bank account. You put a Mexican bank account number, you put an amount, you pay a lightning invoice, so you send Bitcoin to Swapido, and then Swapido pays the bank account you want us to pay. It could be your bank account, it could be someone else's bank account. You could be Mexican, you could be a foreigner, you could do it inside Mexico, you could do it outside Mexico. So it works as a remittance platform as well, you know. And why was it created? Because well, the first user of Swapido is me. So I moved to Mexico. I earned my wage in Bitcoin. I moved to Mexico 3 years ago. I'm originally from, well, I'm from Peru, but I grew up in Montreal, Canada. And at first, I was having a hard time, converting my Bitcoin to pesos in Mexico. And there's also a bunch of platforms, but they're all custodial. They all have a bunch of tokens and on altcoins, and they're not like simple, like a one step. I send Bitcoin from my own wallet and it pays a bank account. I have to like deposit, trade, withdraw, the traditional exchange flow. So I wanted something simple that was accessible to everyone, foreigners and locals, and something that was Bitcoin only and non-custodial. And using Lightning, we make it ultra fast, right? So I think it's a super convenient way for people to live on Bitcoin in Mexico, because you can literally pay anyone with it. But it's also a great way to send money to Mexico if you're living, well, if you're not in Mexico, right, or you're not Mexican. So a lot of our users use it to pay like freelancers they hire in Mexico, and yeah, I think that's a great use case too.
Interesting. So in Mexico, what is different about the Mexican market versus anywhere else in the world, the US or Europe or whatnot?
Right, very interesting. So I guess the first fact to understand when answering this question is to which level are Mexican households exposed to financial assets, like how many um, families directly own stocks, bonds. In the US, it's about 60%. In Mexico, it's 2%, 2.5%. Okay, so 97% of households in Mexico have never bought a stock, a bond. They don't even have a trading account, So just put that into context. So we're dealing with people that are way behind on this, So you gotta like you just the like in the US, if you make an ad saying, "Hey, come trade on Coinbase, whatever." People are like, "Oh, it's like trading on Robinhood." People already know what Robinhood is or other apps like that. In Mexico, no, now they're getting a bit into the fintechs, but that hasn't been the history, So that's like the first thing to understand. So basically, what I'm saying is, it's not for it's not as the market reach is probably for now not as big. You won't have high rates of adoption across the country, but I think it's useful for particularly foreigners that come to Mexico. There's a lot of expats that use Bitcoin and stablecoins in Mexico, so it's very useful for them. There's a lot of young people in Mexico that are learning about this stuff. That want to get into like professional opportunities related to this industry as well. So it's very useful for them too, and it's also very useful for the wealthy as well. So I would say that's a bit of the context, because it's in the end, Mexico is a third world country, right? So about like, and we can talk about more stats regarding this. Like debit cards, about only a third of Mexicans have a debit card.
Wow.
So like that's very, very Mexican adults, only like 35% have a debit card. About like 55% of them have a bank account, but only 30, which is still low. So I like 45% of Mexicans don't have a bank account, 65% of Mexicans don't have a debit card, and 97% of Mexican households don't have a stock or bond account. Even like 50% of Mexicans work in the informal economy. So a lot of people are completely disconnected from the financial system. But it's changing. It's growing very fast. Like, for example, debit card adoption and transaction volume last year was like up 25% in just 1 year, and it's been following that trend. So we're seeing fast growth, which is interesting. We're seeing a lot of education as well. And so I believe that the next couple of years, there's going to be an explosive growth of adoption in Mexico. But it's not just adoption of Bitcoin, its adoption of financial usage in general.
What does non-custodial mean for someone who's never heard that term?
Non-custodial means that you can use this platform without leaving funds on it. So for example, we've heard many cases like FTX or BlockFi where like platforms ran away with your money. Basically, Celsius was another one. You had money in their account, and then they just ran away with your money. Said we have no money to give your money. We cannot give you back your money, right? As we've seen in history happen with banks, where the bank is just doesn't give you back your money. Custodial exchange platforms work in the same way. They work like banks. They take custody of your own money, and when someone has custody of your own money, you only have a promise that they will give you back the money. It's an IOU. However, when you have Bitcoin, is different than like a stock portfolio because it's not just a promise or a contract. Bitcoin is property, literally digital property. So you can make sure you're the owner of your Bitcoin. Like you can be sure you have gold in your safety deposit at home. You can be sure you have your Bitcoin in your own wallet, and only you can access it. So if Swapido, you don't leave any funds on Swapido. You can use funds directly from your own wallet, and we instantly make the exchange. So as soon as you send us Bitcoin, we instantly convert it into fiat. So that's what makes it non-custodial. So it's way less risky for users, and I believe it's actually a superior user experience as well.
You and I share one thing that I didn't tell you before we started recording, which is that both of us moved to Mexico during COVID. And one of the takes that I've been trying to articulate to people is that as we move into a digital first economy globally, people like yourself, talented, capable, skilled people, can decide where they want to live geographically and not be subject to one specific government's dictate or rules or laws. So how does Bitcoin, even as a whole, allow for people to be more autonomous and maybe even to hold governments accountable?
That's a very good question. So it makes me think of a quote. Before answering the question, I'm just going to give this context. It makes me think of a quote from the Sovereign Individual book, where they actually predict two things. First of all, they predict Bitcoin as a digital currency, as an internet money, but they also predict the fact that people are going to be digital nomads because they're going to be able to work digitally from anywhere, and they're going to go wherever they're treated best. So I believe both the digital economy, but the digital money, which is Bitcoin, give you more freedom as a sovereign individual and actually make this foreign individual idea into a reality. And so you can get paid in Bitcoin. You can work from anywhere in the world. You don't have to get a bank account to get paid, which usually requires legal paperwork, both on your part and the employer's part. You can just receive Bitcoin from anyone without any legal or regulatory constraints. So I get paid in Bitcoin, and I can use it anywhere in the world. And tomorrow I could move to any country, and I could just take my income with me. So it gives me a lot of freedom, and I believe more and more people are going to be adopting this in the coming years. They're going to be earning Bitcoin, and they're going to go where they're treated best. And we're already seeing this. The facts are clear that a lot of people are moving to places they would rather be. So Mexico is one of them. It has many pros as well as it has many cons. We see people moving to Dubai, for example, in the Middle East. Southeast Asia is another big region people are going to. So it's mostly, I would say, those three. But a lot of people are moving to the US as well. So this, at the end, I believe it gives you more freedom to choose where you're treated best. And this is clearly a growing trend. I think COVID also, which, by the way, is also predicted in the Sovereign Individual, that there's going to be a global pandemic. And like governments are going to use it as an excuse to like close borders. Well, I believe that just opened our eyes, and it, like, I made the move. Would I have made the move without it? Maybe not, So that just opened my eyes. And even though COVID has passed, I now know I'm free because I have Bitcoin, and I have digital skills that allow me to work online. So yeah, I go where I'm treated the best, and that's the current case. The current case for that is Mexico. It might be different in the future.
Why is Mexico not known as a Bitcoin hub versus like a Costa Rica, Guatemala, El Salvador? What is it? What's the difference there?
It's a very good question. Maybe because maybe because it's already like a very mainstream expat destination. Maybe others are a bit more off the radar. Like, let's say you go to Cancun, it's like basically Disneyland. So maybe Bitcoiners aren't interested in what's already super, mainstream as a touristic and expat destination. But there are a bit of growing Bitcoin communities in Mexico. Uh, there's about 5 communities in Mexico. One is Isla Mujeres. There's Isabella in Isla Mujeres. She works at like Bitcoin magazine. She like teaches Bitcoin in person to locals in Isla Mujeres. There's Bitcoin Merida, or I think now they call it Mayan Bitcoiners, where they go and they do events and they go to schools. It's like some Canadian woman that's doing that with some Mexicans. There's a project to build like a citadel in Baja California by a guy on Twitter who goes like Crypto Zorro, like a Bitcoin citadel. He also did like a conference a few months ago there, Baja Bitcoin, something like that. And there's us in La Casa de Satoshi in Mexico City. We have this physical space where we do like monthly technical meetups like BitDevs, and we do parties as well. And there's one in Guadalajara where it's mostly like a dev community where they do BitDevs as well. But like Chris Guida, this Bitcoin developer, is there to teach like local people into becoming developers and becoming Bitcoin developers. So there's a growing. This is growing. So I would tell you another reason why I guess like Mexico was already very crypto developed, like probably Guatemala and Costa Rica. I've never heard of like a lot of crypto money going in and trying to make crypto mainstream. But in Mexico, there is. It's called Bitso. It's the biggest Latin American exchange. Bitso sponsors the main football team. They have marketing everywhere in the country. So it was very crypto dominated for a while, and now it's finally changing over the last 2 years.
So you just launched Swapido recently, correct?
Yeah, 2 months ago.
2 months ago. And talk to me a little bit about the journey, getting it off the ground. What have been some of the biggest wins so far?
Right. Okay. So, the journey, I would tell you, it started about now, probably it was in around March. This is an idea that I've had for like 2 years. First of all, when I was living in Montreal, I had a little startup called Verify. We were a non-custodial Bitcoin exchange in Canada. You could buy and sell Bitcoin in Canada. So I always I've been in this business for years. I work at Bull Bitcoin after that. Okay. So I wanted to do something similar in Mexico. And then I guess through my own experience, I found the angle of the MVP product that I wanted to launch, which is Swapido, which is you can sell your Bitcoin for pesos with Lightning and move Bitcoin from your wallet to anybody's bank account in a matter of seconds. So that idea of launching a Bitcoin project, Bitcoin exchange in Mexico, has been floating in my head for about 2 years. But I finally got to do it because I saw the Bitcoin company launch an API that made it very simple for me to do this. So I went and used the API, partnered with them, and I launched Swapido, the web application. So that was this year, and then we launched in October. We have about 100 signups, 150 signups. We have a few, maybe 10 daily active users. So people use us to send money to Mexico, to live off Bitcoin in Mexico. Like me, we're just get on zero Bitcoiners that have no fiat, that earn Bitcoin. So you got to spend your Bitcoin to live. And there's a lot of people using us for remittance too, as I said. And I would say the biggest wins we've had so far, besides from the few users we have, is the fact that we're getting a lot of community support from these different communities that I mentioned earlier, because there's not a lot of Bitcoin only startups in Mexico. There's another one, shout out to them, they're called Capital X. They've been Bitcoin only in Mexico for about 6-7 years now. So besides them, but they're quite of a small shop. Besides them, it's only crypto gambling exchanges. So people appreciate the fact that we're honest. We're doing something that's Bitcoin only. So they give us a lot of support, which I'm very thankful for. So the users, the community support, people want to contribute to the project. They ask me, can I work for you guys? Unfortunately, we're not hiring now, but it's nice to get support through that. And I would say a lot of companies want to partner. A lot of people are reaching out to help out with the legal matters, or with getting like bank accounts, or opening accounts with partner providers. So that's nice too. So I mean, I'm quite optimistic that this is going to continue. We're going to continue increasing users and features and solutions we offer to the market, and in reception by the country and the community.
So when I love talking to entrepreneurs and founders. I'm one myself, and one of the characteristics that I have seen other people have that I try and have myself is having a vision, solving a problem for yourself. It sounds like is the way that this started, but also working towards that vision without necessarily seeing massive success in the short term. And Bitcoin teaches having a low time preference. When you hold Bitcoin, you know that you don't judge success in a day, a week, a month, even a year. You're thinking 4, 10, 20 years out into the future. So talk to me a little bit about the psychological element of being a founder. You've done it before, so maybe you've learned some stuff in the past, but what are the ways that you just constantly keep pushing the ball forward despite, and I also love how, you guys are getting started. You're aware that you're only a few months in. So the fact that you have any users means that there are people that you're solving a problem for. And I also think, just to add this in, you're making a conscious decision or a conscious bet. We're all betting, right? How we allocate our time and energy is a gamble in and of itself. Life is very precious. I could be gambling by, going to work a fiat job, or going to the gym, or doing this podcast. Like, it's all gamble. Maybe that's the wrong word for it, but like, what is the psychological side of starting something and having foresight towards the future that we're moving to?
Very good question. So, I mean, I believe in my vision. My vision is that Swapido becomes a reference, a platform in all of Latin America that brings Bitcoin only to Latin America. I believe it's the right time. It would have been too early a couple of years ago. The Bitcoin only message hadn't been resonating as much. It also, people hadn't been burned by cryptos that much to see that it was a scam. Like just 2 years ago, people were still believing in Ethereum as a viable Bitcoin alternative. Nowadays, that's like basically a running joke, right? So uh, I think it's the right time. I have a ton of affection, I would say, or maybe that's the wrong word, but for the region. I have a sweet spot in my heart for Latin America. I'm Peruvian. I believe, so I think that motivates me as well too. It's believing in the potential of this region as a global economic bloc, believing in Bitcoin, in the vision of Bitcoin only, and believing it's the right time, and I'm the right person to bring this vision and this suite of products to this region, right? So I gotta be a big believer in Bitcoin, and I am. I've been dedicating the past 7 years. I've worked full time in Bitcoin. So I believe a combination of those factors, plus as well, I think it's valuable to see some sort of immediate reward, right? The fact that we're already getting some users, The fact that people are constantly telling us like this, what you're doing is valuable. We want it in like Ecuador or Peru too, and the fact that people are like willing to help out, that just motivates me to keep going. And I believe it's like a valid. I think it's also what motivates me is that it's like it makes sense rationally to do this. It's not just some idea of an unproven business model. No, this is a very proven business model, right? River, for example, in the US is making a ton of money. Cash App as well. We can see it with their quarterly financials. They're Bitcoin only, and it works. Uh, we already see a big confirmation in that sense that this business model specifically, Relay, for example, in Europe, this non-custodial Bitcoin only model, or it doesn't matter, custodial, non-custodial, but the fact that it's Bitcoin only as a business model, it works. So and nobody has done it yet in Latin America besides like small shops. So that motivates me to keep going, and I also think, I guess also in some sense, I'm motivated because I've in some way I've not a sunk cost, but it's been 7 years that I've been doing this. I really don't want to switch and start working in another industry. Like this is I'm exactly where I think I should be. So that motivates me to keep going as well.
If you feel, I say, if you success, the definition of success in my mind, the best definition I've come to is waking up in those first moments of the day feeling like drawn into what you're about to do that day. So if you feel that, then, and you're able to support yourself and navigate that side of things, the logical side of things, then you're definitely on the right path. So if I put my investor hat on, I just heard you say two things. Number one is that now's the time. And number two, that you are the right person to bring this to the market. So how big can Swapido get? If I'm a potential investor and I'm asking you, hey, I want to write you a check. First of all, would you take the money? What would you spend it on? And how big could this potentially be in the future?
Right. Well, I mean, if the terms are right, I'll take the money, right? But that depends on the terms. I wouldn't. I'm not looking for money right now because I don't want to be. First of all, I want to keep my business between me and my fellow founders uh, as much as possible. I don't want to set expectations that we're going to grow super fast. This is a long journey. As soon as you get a check, it's like, okay, now you got 12, 18 months for the next round, and you got to move this really fast. VCs are all about, can you become a $1 billion company? If not, we're not that interested. VCs are not interested in a profitable business that remains like medium size. They're like, we go bigger because it's they invest in 10 startups, 9 fail, and one becomes $1 billion. That's it. That's the model of a VC firm. So I don't want to give expectations that our goal is just to be $1 billion startup or nothing. No, we're very fine if we can just make a living wage for ourselves and some extra money. I'm not gonna. I have I'm modest enough to be happy with whatever results life gives me. But I think it could get really big if to be honest, I think we could, I think someone could make easily $100 million in volume a month, which is about 1% in margin, so about $1 million a month. I think that's easily done through multiple Latin American countries, and I would tell you 10 times that that's doable 2-3 years from now, even $1 billion a month in volume. I think Latin America as an economic bloc will become similar to the European economic bloc, to the Eastern Asian economic bloc, to the maybe not to the United States, but to other economic blocs. I think it could be comparable to that one day. So yeah, I think the market size is big. I think the moving to the financialization of the region is also a fast growing trend. I think Bitcoin solves many problems here, is that it even more than in the US and Europe. And yeah, I think I think that's it. So I think you said, would I take the check? How big can it get? And what was the other part of your question?
Oh, sorry, I'm looking something up right now. No, I just am curious, like if you've evaluated, like, I mean, it sounds like you're so focused on building the product that you're not focused on a pitch deck and finding investors, and those people will come when the time is right. My understanding is that you're completely self-funded to this point, so you've got a working product off the ground with no outside funding. Talk to me a little bit about what the team looks like. You mentioned your founders. How do you guys operate as a team?
Yeah, makes the very good question. So for now, my fellow founders want to remain anonymous. They help me out. I'm the only one working on this full time. They're helping me out part time. I got a CTO that handles all the architectural design and most of the dev work. But I got also a web designer slash developer that contributes to the technical work and mostly to all the design. And so those are like two fellow founders, and the third one is helps me out with social media, with events, with all the promotion and the marketing related to Swapido. So my role is to handle everything else, which has been a lot of like the administrative side of a business, which means legal, accounting, and just execution in general, like operation management, customer support, a lot of the marketing too, and a lot of the talking to users, figuring out what we should build, figuring out the strategy of Swapido. There's a lot of legal work involved in Swapido,
I believe it.
particularly for our future plans. So I spent a lot of time working on that. We want to grow to become like a full-on like platform where you can buy, sell in multiple countries. Right now, right now our legal situation is very risk minimized because we users send the money directly to the Bitcoin company, and the Bitcoin company handles the off ramp. We just handle the KYC and the account and the user experience. So we like evaluate the risk associated to each client, and we the user doesn't see through the interface any other company, just see Swapido. But we're not even a money transmitter. We're not an exchange legally. We're just basically a KYC front end. So, but we're taking steps to get all the regulatory approval and licenses to be a full-on exchange, so we can buy, sell. People can buy, sell, and do other things with Swapido. And we'll be launching this next year.
That's exciting. So the biggest thing, maybe one of the biggest bottlenecks, is the legal side of things, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest bottlenecks. Mexico has a very specific situation. So, for example, so just to give you some context, in 2018, the Congress legalized Bitcoin, not as a legal tender, but just something that you could use within a legal context that's not in a gray zone, so that it would get regulated after, right? That's usually the first steps. Like, we legalize it and then we regulate it. But before they could regulate it, the central bank, which has a ton of power in Mexico, decided to ban Mexican financial companies from using Bitcoin with consumers. So right now, it's illegal for a Mexican company to offer financial services related to Bitcoin. So, however, so then the question comes, like, how can you do an exchange in Mexico? Well, what's legal is to have a foreign exchange offer services to Mexicans. And so that's what basically everybody does. You got to create a foreign exchange, and you can offer service to Mexicans, and you have no oversight by the financial authorities in Mexico. However, you have to use like fintechs and banks to interface with the banking system, right? And that is also not a legal limit, but a sort of provider limit. However, when the central bank did that, it created a sort of a free for all zone for like foreign companies, because it was completely unregulated. Foreign companies were completely unregulated. So at that point, the fiscal authorities, like the Mexican IRS, panicked, and they were like, "We're changing the money laundering law to include crypto exchanges, to include foreign crypto exchanges." So as a foreign exchange that operates in Mexico, you got to register with the Mexican IRS, the SAT, as a vulnerable activity. So basically, a foreign unregulated activity that's vulnerable to money laundering. And you gotta have a compliance officer. You gotta get approval, and you gotta file monthly reports.
Hmm.
So, and all that process costs like tens of thousands of dollars, right? So that's like the way it works for like an exchange in Mexico. Um, and like even then, there's still a lot of limits. Like for example, you cannot offer like digital peso accounts. If you want to offer a digital peso account in Mexico, you got to get the fintech license, which costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. And there's a lot of red tape involved, and there's a lot of even gating where like they just give it to like friends and like business people that are close business wise. Either they have family in the government, so it's hard to navigate this, but it's doable in the end. You just gotta be persistent. And that's what we try to do.
So my girlfriend's Mexican. She's from Guadalajara. I don't know if I told you that, but
Nice.
she always had, since we first met, she has so much passion and like just pride around her culture. And it's maybe something that all Mexicans have. Like you just can't take it out of them. Like they're Mexican. They're going to wave the Mexican flag. I live in an area of town here where there's a lot of Latino people, and I'll see, a truck with the Mexican flag vinyled on the front of the car. But my take to her, and maybe this is a selfish question because I want you to answer it better than I could. I always tell her, and even to back up, sorry, Mexico has had a lot of challenges different than the US. There's been there's corruption everywhere, but Mexico specifically is such a beautiful country, so rich in resources, in talent and capability, and yet they're still, as you described, a third world country. If you go there, I have another friend who says Mexico es muy duro because Mexico's a little rough, right?
Yeah.
And so Mexico has been basically screwed over throughout the years. I mean, even going back to when the Spanish were in control. What about Mexico and Latin America is there so much potential for Bitcoin to make people's lives better?
Right. Well, I think, first of all, I would go back to the points that I've raised before, which the first one being the adoption of the financialization in general. This is a point of time where, like, I would say technology, and particularly, technology is just making finance be adopted finally in across the world. Okay, this is happening in Africa, as we see with like instant payment technologies, where people don't have a bank account, but they have a cell phone, so they can use financial systems without having a bank account. So the same thing we're seeing in Mexico. So that's the first part, just financialization in general. Well, the second part I would tell you is what are the problems Bitcoin solves? Well, Bitcoin is the best store of value and the best form of money, but it's really good against censorship resistant, related to government, related to the banking sector, inflation related to government. So it allows you to opt out, as we always say. It allows you to opt out of fiat, of corruption. And in Mexico, there's a bunch of corruption, way more than in US. So you would want to opt out of that. In Mexico, there's a lot of violence and risks to your security. So how can you be more secure? Well, you use Bitcoin rather than have a bank account that someone could tip off a street gang that you have this amount of money in the bank account, and you get targeted, right? With Bitcoin, nobody has to know. So I think it will be a solution to those problems. At least it will be a solution people can pick. I don't believe in the fact that everybody's going to use Bitcoin in the future. I just think Bitcoin is a solution for some and for whoever wants it, and it's right there. So I think there's a lot of potential in that sense. A lot of wealthy people in Mexico too see Bitcoin as a benefit for them to skip government control. But the government in Mexico has in history been very authoritarian. It's not as much anymore, but still, there's a lot of people are concerned about government authority on them, and Bitcoin is a way for them to do that, particularly if you're wealthy. So I think all of that makes it that it's particularly interesting to use Bitcoin in Mexico. There was Mexico's most recent hyperinflation was in like '94, so that's also very recent.
Wow.
A lot of people still remember that. So and I think makes it's just more vulnerable to future hyperinflations in general. Because there's more corruption. And it's more easily targeted by foreign countries and currency wars as well, particularly the United States. So I think to all of these issues, Mexico is an option for Bitcoin is an option for Mexicans that will be increasingly valuable with time.
And let me add to that too. You mentioned multiple times remittances. And for someone who's never heard that, remittances are when you're making cross-border payments. So you have a family member in the US who is able to help support or send money back to their family in Mexico, in El Salvador, wherever. I was in El Salvador recently, which, by the way, we met in person there, which was a fun conference. But there was a line from out the Western Union, out the door, down the block of people waiting for hours just to receive a remittance from the US or from some other country. And given the fact that money is a store of value, when you work, you trade your time, your energy, your effort for money, and then you want to be able to send that to your family member, and you have a middleman, Western Union or MoneyGram or one of these other ones, that's literally taking 8 Wise, the app takes 8% of your transfer. So that is quite literally a company that is extracting time and energy from people who are making a huge sacrifice, leaving their family behind, going to the US. Like, it's not easy to be an immigrant and live in this country that it's very different culturally. It's, it might not be as warm. There's not as many fiestas going on up here. And so I am very bullish on remittances specifically. The thing that I was looking up a few minutes ago is just how big the market for remittances is, right?
Right.
It's crazy. And
billion.
Say that again.
66 billion just from Mexico in the last year. From
66 billion. So wow, that is a ton. And to think of how much of that value, that human time, is stolen because the current fiat banking system doesn't allow, and people aren't aware that there's other ways to do it. So I think remittances is like low hanging fruit, for an easy story to be told. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I often forget about that because honestly, I just think there's just so many stories and so many use cases. But yeah, remittance is one of the biggest use cases, and you could even go beyond that. Like global trade doesn't count as remittance, but you're taking money from the exterior as well. So Mexico is a very export-based economy, mostly to the U.S. And a lot of money is moved between the U.S. and Mexico every day. So that is also a big use case for Bitcoin. And finally, tourism. Mexico is the largest recipient of tourism money in the world. It's like the fifth tourist destination in terms of number of tourists. But in terms of dollars or money, is the first in the world, before France and Spain.
Wow.
And yeah, so there's a lot of money moving at that moment too, and Bitcoin can also be used in those circumstances, can help out to facilitate the flow of that money. So I mean, there's just so many use cases. So many. I would tell you another story is that I believe Bitcoin will make working like marketplaces for create like digital marketplaces for work more accessible, because you can just be paid by anyone in the world, like I said, without any legal or regulatory approval or compliance. So that can allow Mexicans to work for foreign companies, Bitcoin companies, and get paid in Bitcoin. That's going to be huge as well, I think.
Yeah, and I think just to really hammer home on I mean, remittances is big, yes, but Swapido specifically, if I understand correctly, the biggest problem that it's solving is that if you own Bitcoin, earn Bitcoin, denominate and save in Bitcoin, you have an off ramp that is reliable, that you can trust. So you're not locked into having all this Bitcoin, but not being able to go down and spend pesos for some tacos. I saw there was a tweet you guys made on the Swapido Twitter, which people should go follow. But it was like, what have people put as the names for their payments? And some person put like tacos or something like that. Like people are able to literally buy tacos with their Bitcoin in Mexico. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's for that, but it's also, like I said, for initially we just had this idea, it's like, this is my life. I earn a wage in Bitcoin, so I don't have any fiat, and I want to be able to convert it super fast. But then we got a lot of customers that just are doing remittance with Swapido as well, So I would tell you now it's both.
What do you think the biggest lever for growth is? Is it partnership with other Bitcoin companies? One that comes to mind is called Block Rewards. They're based out of Canada. Have you heard of them?
Right. Yeah.
So there's a lot of companies that have clear visions. Well, clear, but they're positioning themselves for a future in which Bitcoin is much more commonly accepted and used and earned. But what are some of the biggest levers that Swapido could pull to grow? Like, what if wave your magic wand? Like, is it getting on Joe Rogan and talking about Swapido? Like, what is it?
I think I think so far, like I said, our offers pretty niche. We're good for like ghetto zero Bitcoiners, which are a niche within niche, and like remittance Bitcoiners with her as well. But over the next year, we're gonna have like we're still in like product development phase. Like I believe in launch early and take a lot of feedback, and then add extra stuff on top. About next year, in like 6 months, we should have the feature that allows people to buy Bitcoin, and that's gonna. I think at that moment, that's gonna be like the biggest lever for our success is going to be adding buy Bitcoin, remaining a Bitcoin brand. And then I think partnering with wallets, partnering with interfaces where platforms that people already use. For example, there's this wallet called Sati. They're Mexican too. We're talking about partnering together. And what Sati does is they have you can create a Lightning wallet inside a WhatsApp as a WhatsApp chat. So it's a WhatsApp bot that is your Lightning wallet, And considering that that WhatsApp is used massively in Latin America, I think it makes a ton of sense to create a Lightning wallet as a WhatsApp bot. So if we could be integrated within such type of wallets that have considered the specific situation of Mexican consumers and Latin American consumers, then we can, bypass the marketing and just go straight to the use the platform as an interface to reach consumers. I think that could be probably the biggest lever.
So I want to ask you a question in Spanish, if you don't mind answering in Spanish as well. Hablo un poco español. No, muy bueno. No, I don't speak it very well. Pero before this podcast, I translated this to make sure that it would come across through. But I think it's a good place to insert this. So, si puderías darle un mensaje sobre Bitcoin a una persona mexicana, ¿cuál sería?
Ok. Entonces, si yo podría darle un mensaje sobre Bitcoin a una persona mexicana, depende, depende. Pues, ¿qué tipo de persona es?
Es una persona, es nueva de Bitcoin, no entiende mucho sobre Bitcoin y le gusta aprender.
Ok, bueno, honestamente, siendo México y siendo que la mayoría de personas son clase media y tienen mucho lugar para crecer, yo les diría que Bitcoin puede transformar su vida porque puede traerles una nueva manera de pensar, sobre todo de pensar más en el futuro. Okay, yo siento que la gente en México debe aprender a pensar más a largo plazo, más en el futuro, y considero que Bitcoin les va a ayudar a hacer ese cambio mental para poder pensar más a largo plazo, ahorrar, a desarrollar habilidades que le permiten de tener más ingresos, para poder ahorrar más y poder gastar menos para pensar más en el futuro. Entonces, yo creo que al final del día, si el consejo que tengo para la gente en México es estudien Bitcoin y habilidades que les permitirá incrementar sus ingresos, gasten menos y ahorren más y les va a cambiar la vida.
Muchas gracias. Entiendo. My understanding is you'll think more in the future, you'll plan more for the future, you'll build skills. Maybe just hit me with a quick translation in English.
Well, it's kind of, you kind of got it. So basically what I said is that I would advise the Mexican person to learn about Bitcoin because it would allow them to change their mentality to a long-term thinking mentality, a low-time preference mentality, so that will allow them to save more money, spend less, learn skills to earn a higher wage, to then save even more money, and that will just give them more fulfillment in their life and allow them to be more free in general, so but I mean, that's because Mexicans are still, like I said, a developing country, a third world nation, so they still have a lot of room for growth. I would say in the US, my message would be different. Would be like, save up what you already got, or like your house, sell your house for Bitcoin, or like because there's already wealth, and now the goal is to preserve that wealth.
Right.
But in Mexico, like for most people, they don't have wealth. Their goal is to create that wealth. So how can you use Bitcoin to create more wealth? Well, you can allow yourself to have a long-term, low-time preference mentality through saving money, investing in yourself to gain more skills, to earn a higher wage, spend less money, which will allow you to grow, right? And how does like a developing country become a developed country? Adopting this type of mentality.
Absolutely. Savings is critical to having capital in order to invest. And I think even in Mexico, that, it's probably similar to El Salvador, maybe a little bit more further along just with the infrastructure and development there. But they are thinking about the future. They're just limited in their ability to do so. And when you're not aware of this tool, you may feel like, what's the point? Maybe my kids will go to the US and they'll have a better future, but you can start to just think about how to adopt Bitcoin. I know for me, it's changed my life so much, thinking more long-term, not thinking that I need to be so like all in or nothing. Like I need to make millions of dollars in order to even have a house and have a lifestyle that I can raise kids in a family. With Bitcoin, I have confidence that I can build skills, add value to society, and store that value over time. So I don't think everybody needs to become a financial advisor or a hedge fund manager in their free time in order to try and beat inflation. That's the beauty of Bitcoin. And yeah, I love your message. I'm going to share it with a couple of my Spanish-speaking friends and my girlfriend's mom. And yeah, I think, Gustavo, has been awesome. Where can people find you, follow you, support your work?
Yeah, well, on Twitter. Just add me on Twitter, follow me on Twitter, send me a DM. You can, well, first of all, my email is Gustavo at Swapido.com. And my handle is Gustavo JFE on every platform, including X.com, formerly known as Twitter. Yeah, Gustavo JFE.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Gustavo.
Thank you so much, Kyle.